Barakata Yahweh, Barakata Yahabushai, Bahasham, Baraka Kodash, Barakatum. First and foremost, I want to give all praises, glory, and infinite honors to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahabushai. Double honors to the apostles and elders of Great Millstone who rule and teach well. And peace and salutations to you sincere Akim out there, pushing this word in truth and sincerity to the four corners of the globe. May you brothers endure until the end. This is the brother Ra'aya with another video, and in this video, I'm going to start it off with a little bit of this video from RT America's YouTube channel titled Russian and U.S. warships converge in Red Sea, full show. And as we'll see from the information in this video and some of the other information I've got, hey, prophecy is moving very quickly. Hey, all the pieces are getting set in place for that third woe, or World War III, that battle of Armageddon, that battle in the Valley of Jehoshaphat over in that Middle Eastern region where all the major heathen powers are going to be gathered down to fight in.
All right, let's start with this. It is one of the world's scariest places, but now it appears to be an attractive country, at least as far as superpowers are concerned. Sudan, off the coast of Africa, bordering the Red Sea, is the site of one of the world's worst genocides. But now it's getting attention for another reason, and that reason is its location. RT correspondent Alex Mihailovich starts us off.
It's a nation in the midst of transformation. Since 2019, when an uprising ousted Sudan's longtime leader, Omar al-Bashir, the nation has experienced plenty of ups and downs. At the beginning of this year, we saw a state of emergency declared in Sudan as demonstrators hit the streets, often clashing violently with police. The country has been plagued by years of internal conflict and both an economic and humanitarian crisis. That said, progress has been made. A political transition, although sometimes painful, has increased people's freedoms in Sudan and has opened up opportunities to create a more peaceful society while increasing international engagement, an arena where Sudan aims to strategically benefit. As tensions remain high between the U.S. and Russia, Sudan has decided to play both sides of the fence. Both superpowers have been competing for influence in East Africa, and Sudan knows it. Not to upset either side, and to benefit from both, Sudan has welcomed the navies of both the United States and Russia to its shores. Last month, we witnessed the first U.S. military vessel to dock in Sudan in decades. And just days ago, we saw the U.S. destroyer, the USS Winston Churchill, arrive in Port Sudan within 24 hours of a Russian frigate. Last November, Russian President Vladimir Putin approved a deal to establish a Russian naval facility in Sudan, which will be capable of holding nuclear-powered vessels. As well as other provisions, the Russian military has agreed to offer training and cooperative support to Khartoum's military, and according to reports, will provide Sudan with weapons and military equipment. In the competition to gain influence on Khartoum, last year, the United States removed Sudan from its state sponsors of terrorism list and offered significant debt relief to the nation. In response, Sudan agreed to normalize relations with Israel. Sudan has been a place of interest for Russia and the U.S. both strategically and economically. Not only is the country positioned on the strategic shipping routes of the Red Sea, but it also conveniently sits near Middle Eastern countries who are currently in strife, such as Yemen and Syria, making it an ideal position to have a military presence.
And that's the main point right there. Let's go back to that map. Hey, it's strategic importance to the Middle Eastern region because that's where the battle in the Valley of Jehoshaphat is going to take place. Sudan is just a side note. This is just Yahweh Bahasham Yahabushai maneuvering all the players in place for this upcoming battle in the Valley of Jehoshaphat.
Countries who are currently in strife, such as Yemen and Syria, making it an ideal position to have a military presence. Sudan's government is well aware of the country's appeal, and instead of choosing one or the other, right now, the nation is benefiting from the courtship of both Russia and the U.S. For RT, I'm Alex Mihailovich.
This is Joel chapter 3. I'm going to start at verse 9. Proclaim ye this among the Gentiles, which is what the men of the Lord, the true prophets of the Most High, chiefly through GMS or Great Millstone, are doing by going out to the highways and byways preaching this word, as well as putting up video epistles like this, proclaiming among you heathen Gentiles, you Edomites, as so-called white people, Moabites, as so-called Chinese people, Ishmaelites, are the so-called Arab people, Hamites, are the so-called Africans, Elamites, are the so-called East Indians, Ammonites, are the so-called Japanese people, etc., etc. Prepare war, World War III, nuclear war, war with Iran, the Battle of Armageddon, the battle in the Valley of Jehoshaphat. Wake up the mighty men, let all the men of war draw near, let them come up. As we just saw from this video, you're seeing the mighty men get woken up and being drawn near into that Middle Eastern region, with U.S. and Russian military powers being brought towards Sudan. And also, what have you been having going on in the Middle East? Biden just did more airstrikes to hit Iranian targets in Syria. You've got NATO moving troops into Iraq. And then you've got Israel talking about striking Iranian nuclear targets. Again, all the pieces are being put in place. Wake up the mighty men. Let all the men of war draw near. Let them come up. Beat your plowshares into swords and your pruning hooks into spears. Let the weak say I am strong. Assemble yourselves and come, all ye heathen, and gather yourselves together round about. Thither cause thy mighty ones to come down, O Yahweh, and those mighty ones are the death angels of Yahweh Bahasham Yahushai, holding back this great destruction, waiting to get the go-ahead to release it. And they're going to release it after the mark of the beast, which is the microchip implant, is mandatorily implemented. Let the heathen be wakened and come up to the valley of Jehoshaphat, which in the Hebrew is Yahweh's Shaphat, or Yahweh's judgment. For there will I sit to judge all the heathen round about. And when you go up to the first two verses in this chapter, you'll see that the Most High is gathering you heathen nations down into the valley of Jehoshaphat to judge you for afflicting the apple of his eye, the true children of Israel, who are the so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans. Put ye in the sickle, for the harvest is ripe. Come get you down, for the press is full, the fats overflow, for their wickedness is great. Multitudes, multitudes in the valley of decision, for the day of Yahweh is near in the valley of decision. And if you've got that spiritual eye salve, you can clearly see that the day of Yahweh is very near in the valley of decision. And I'm going to go into a few more precepts and articles and videos to show that, hey, biblical prophecy is taking place right before your very eyes. That the U.S. and Russia getting gathered down into that region is by no coincidence, and it's not for a political, economic, or military means. It's for the means of Yahweh Bahasham Yahushai to gather you heathens down to judge you in the valley of Jehoshaphat. This is Joel chapter 2, verse 20. But I will remove far off from you the Northern Army, the North American Army, the United States military, all branches, the Marines, the Air Force, the Navy, the National Guard, the Army, you name it, and will drive him into a land barren and desolate. Hey, that Middle Eastern region and the main staging ground for this battle in the Valley of Jehoshaphat is going to be Saudi Arabia, which the U.S. also has a heavy military presence in, with his face toward the East Sea. And when we go to a map of the Middle East, what do we see? You've got Saudi Arabia right here, and what's towards the east? To the northeast, you've got Iraq and the Tigris and Euphrates River, and the U.S. has a presence in Iraq. Then you've got the Persian Gulf, and what's above the Persian Gulf? Iran, which is the main target for the U.S. and the state of Israel in that Middle Eastern region. They ultimately want to take it down so they can balkanize the Middle East and allow Israel to be the main hegemon in the region. And his hinder part, or behind him toward the utmost sea, the Red Sea, and what just so happens to be right next to the Red Sea, Sudan. And again, from that video on RT America's YouTube channel.
with Israel. Sudan has been a place of interest for Russia and the U.S. both strategically and economically. Not only is the country positioned on the strategic shipping routes of the Red Sea, but it
its hindermost part towards the sea, the Red
also
Sea,
conveniently sits near Middle Eastern countries who are currently in strife, such as Yemen and Syria, positioned on the strategic shipping routes of the Red Sea. But it also conveniently sits near Middle Eastern countries who are currently in strife.
It also conveniently sits towards Middle Eastern countries which are in strife. Again, Sudan is just an appetizer to the main course, gathering these major powers down into the Valley of Jehoshaphat. And his hinder part toward the utmost sea, and his stink shall come up, and his ill savor shall come up, because he had done great things. Hey, you U.S. military personnel that find yourself in the Valley of Jehoshaphat during the battle in the Valley of Jehoshaphat better come to terms with the fact that that's going to be your final resting place, because there's going to be a great slaughter in the Valley of Jehoshaphat. And again, as we saw from that RT America video, you've got the U.S. getting gathered down further into that region, and also Russia, which again is a more biblical prophecy taking place right before your very eyes. This is Ezekiel chapter 38. I'm going to start at verse 1. And the word of Yahweh came unto me, saying, Son of man, set thy face against Gog, which is speaking of Russia, because in the scriptures, Russia is known as Gog, as well as the spiritual Medes, as well as the north country in Jeremiah chapter 50, verse 9, the land of Magog, the chief prince of Meshech and Tubal, and prophesy against him, and say, Thus saith the Lord Yahweh, Behold, I am against thee, O Gog, the chief prince of Meshech and Tubal, and I will turn thee back and put hooks into thy jaws, and I will bring thee forth. And where it says, I will turn thee back and put hooks into thy jaws, that's the Most High putting that old confrontational Soviet Union spirit back on these Russians, which we're clearly seeing happening. You've got Russia building back up its military, political, and economic presences around the world, with them building up a military port in Sudan, and also rebuilding up a military port that they had in Syria. And what did they do during that Syrian civil war? They helped Bashar al-Assad militarily fight against the U.S. and the state of Israel's proxy mercenary force known as ISIS. And also, they're building back up their military arsenals, with creating those hypersonic weapons, deploying the Satan II, and also building up their military power back in that Arctic Ocean region, which is going to play a very big part in this upcoming Third World War, because Russia is going to shoot nuclear missiles onto the U.S., and Russia shooting its nuclear missiles over the Arctic and over Canada to hit its targets in the U.S. would be the shortest trajectory time for its missiles to reach the U.S. And all thine army, horses and horsemen, all of them clothed with all sorts of armor, even a great company with bucklers and shields, and all of them handling swords. Russia moving its military assets down into the Valley of Jehoshaphat, its tanks, its fighter jets, soldiers, artillery pieces, navy, you name it. And we've seen the beginning stages of that with, again, that Syrian civil war, with them moving military assets into Syria to help Bashar al-Assad. And again, as we saw from that RT America video, they're moving military hardware over to the Sudan, which will be much easier for them to pivot over into the Valley of Jehoshaphat when that battle kicks off. Verse 5, Persia, which is the ancient name for Iran. And we know that Russia is one of Iran's main allies. And when the U.S. and Israel go to war against Iran, who's going to come to their back, to their protection? Russia, Ethiopia, and Libya with them, all of them with shield and helmet. Gomer and all his bands, and Gomer's Turkey, the house of Togarmah of the north quarters, and all his bands, and many people with thee. Be thou prepared, and prepare for thyself, thou and all thy company that are assembled unto thee, and be thou a guard or protector unto them. And I just explained how Gog or Russia is being a guard unto Iran or Persia. And if you've been paying attention to the news and geopolitics over the past couple of years, you could clearly see that Russia is also being a guard unto Ethiopia and Libya as well. Now I'm going to go to an article on WW.com titled Russia's Comeback in Africa. Africa's one-time big political patron now wants to solicit its business. At the first Russia-African Economic Forum, the scope of opportunity being advanced is grand and the geopolitical stakes are high. And this Russian Economic Forum happened a couple of years ago. Most of Africa's political and business leaders are gathered in the Black Sea resort of Sochi for the two-day Kremlin-engineered event that Russian political analysts say has been years in the making. The two sides are set to talk about cooperation in almost every possible sphere, including agriculture and energy, oil, gas, and steel production, mining, education, investment, and science. A string of deals are likely to be put forward, fine-tuned, agreed, or inked on the sidelines in Sochi: nuclear power plants, technology and tourism agreements, industrial zones, defense, and security equipment, to name a few. Touting its track record, Russia elegantly touts its track record in Africa in the summit documentation. The Federation can help to build Africa, make it prosperous, safe, and smart, according to the program for Sochi. Russia just wants to find its niche and its direction with partnerships in Africa. Olga Kulkova, a researcher at the Institute for African Studies at the Russian Academy of Science, told DW. And hey, listen to this. The tone for the October 23rd to 24th gathering was set days ago when Russian President Vladimir Putin took a swipe at Africa's former colonial masters. We see how an array of Western countries are resorting to pressure, intimidation, and blackmail of sovereign African governments, Putin told Russian media. As the summit opened, Ethiopia was named the latest beneficiary of Russia's Debt for Development program in Africa. Scrapping the debt in excess of 160 million will have to mean privileges for Russian companies wanting to do business in the country that is undergoing major reforms, though. Hey, be thou a guard unto Persia and Ethiopia. And if Ethiopia is doing business with Russian companies, more than likely there's going to be a military component to that relationship as well. As we just saw in that video again from RT America's YouTube channel with Sudan opening up to Russia, you've got Russia offering military training, assistance, and military hardware to Sudan. Jump down to this paragraph right here. It is not untrue that Russia's Soviet-era track record in Africa generally plays in its favor on the world stage. Political analysts in Africa say that despite the passage of several decades, big and mutually beneficial deals with the Kremlin are welcome. Without the firm stand of the Soviet Union during the Cold War and the heyday of the anti-colonial struggle, many of our countries would never have seen the light of independence. Obadiah Malafia, a former deputy governor of Nigeria's central bank, told DW. Back in Ezekiel 38, and I will put hooks into thy jaws and turn thee back. The Most High turning Gog or Russia back into that old Soviet Union spirit. And just as the Soviet Union had ties with Africa in the past, Russia, going back into that old spirit, is building up ties again with Africa. I'm going to jump down to this part right here. Under the section, the go-to country for nuclear energy. What does it say right here? Russia was a supplier of weapons to liberation movements in countries such as Angola and Mozambique well into the 80s. Russia has carved a niche for itself in selling nuclear technology to developing nations. Zambia, Rwanda, Ethiopia, Egypt and Nigeria are among those in the market for Russian-built nuclear power plants. And here's a map of nuclear agreements in Africa with Moscow taking the lead. Russia's in blue and China's in red. And you've got Ethiopia right here. And who's that in red? Let's go to a map of Africa. Ethiopia, Sudan. And who else does Russia have nuclear agreements with? Libya right there. And Russia and China are allies, so Sudan might as well be on the same board with Russia. And that's a nice little corridor of cooperation that Russia has with these countries. And back in Ezekiel 38, not only is Russia being a guard unto Persia and Ethiopia, but Libya as well. Here's a video from the Newsmaker's YouTube channel titled, "What's Russia's Endgame in Libya?"
Since the removal of Muammar Gaddafi in 2011, two main competing powers have emerged in Libya. In Tripoli is the internationally recognized and UN-backed Government of National Accord, or GNA, led by Prime Minister Fayez al-Sarraj. And in the eastern city of Tobruk is the House of Representatives. It's controlled by the warlord Khalifa Haftar, who leads the LNA militia. There are powerful nations that are backing opposing sides in the war. Let's take a look at Russia. Moscow supports Haftar and has supplied him with fighter jets and mercenaries. But Haftar's attempt to capture Tripoli failed, and he's lost territory to the GNA. The Kremlin is now pushing for an end to the fighting.
Не вижу каких-либо вариантов, кроме немедленного прекращения огня и решения всех остальных вопросов на основе переговорного процесса в русле тех пониманий, которые закреплены в декларации Берлинской конференции.
But is Moscow playing a double game in Libya? On one hand, it's urging diplomacy, but at the same time, is sending planes and fighters to Haftar. According to Oxford researcher Samuel Romani, arms and mercenaries are being used to strengthen Haftar's bargaining power in future negotiations. And what are Russia's interests in Libya? US military officials believe the Kremlin is eyeing lucrative energy deals in eastern Libya. They also say Russia wants to expand its political and military reach in the Mediterranean. But with Haftar humiliated, how far is Russia willing to go to secure those interests?
Here's a video from Al Jazeera English's YouTube channel. Fake Libyan dinars printed in Russia fund Haftar's military, be thou a guard unto them.
More than $1 billion worth of new Libyan banknotes found in 2 shipping containers a couple of months ago were yet another sign of Russia's influence in Libya. The cash
That's a pretty big gesture to be printing another country's money for them.
stash found on the Mediterranean island of Malta was en route from the printing works in Moscow to Khalifa Haftar's forces in eastern Libya. The U.S. government welcomed the seizure, saying the alternative dinar notes were counterfeit Libyan currency printed by a Russian state-owned company and ordered by an illegitimate parallel entity. It's 4 years since the parallel central bank in eastern Libya, controlled by Haftar, began printing billions of its dinars in Russia. They look and feel almost exactly like the official currency from Libya's internationally recognized central bank in Tripoli. They've been circulated in most cities across western Libya, except Misrata, known as Libya's economic hub. Haftar is accused of using the banknotes to fund his failed military campaign to capture Tripoli.
We saw the head of the Eastern Central Bank say that the priority is to fund the war on Tripoli. These counterfeit notes were used to pay fighters and of course inflation and the value of the Libyan dinar to decrease.
Business owners and residents say while their sons are fighting on the front lines, they can play their part in the fight against Haftar by boycotting the banknotes.
These notes are counterfeit. The recognized central bank in Tripoli has refused them, so business people in Misrata refuse to accept it. Haftar used this money to destroy our capital. Refusing to deal with it is how we as businessmen are participating in the fight against him.
Russian support is being seen as further escalating the Libyan crisis, creating parallel institutions to the central bank and National Oil Corporation. Russian mercenaries from the Kremlin-backed Wagner Group have been seen in El Sharara, Libya's largest oil field. Leaders in Tripoli say the House of Representatives in the east has taken out loans of $21 billion to fund Haftar's bid to take control of Libya. Economic experts say there are over $8 billion worth of these Russian notes in circulation. The impact on the economy is likely to be felt for years to come. Malik Traina, Al Jazeera.
Let's go back to that map of Africa. You've got Sudan, which Russia is creating ties with, Ethiopia, which Russia has ties with, and Libya, which Russia has ties with. Again, a nice little corridor all around that Middle Eastern region. And Russia also has ties with Syria. And then you've also got the U.S. looking to build ties with Sudan, the U.S. having a military presence in Saudi Arabia and Iraq, and as well as Syria. Hey, these prophecies are speaking, as it says in Isaiah 55, verse 11, so shall my word be that goeth forth out of my mouth. It shall not return unto me void, but it shall accomplish that which I please. These heathen nations getting gathered down into the valley of Jehoshaphat for that battle in the valley of Jehoshaphat, that war of Armageddon, that third woe. Close it out in Revelation chapter 9, verse 12. One woe or destruction is past, referring to World War I, and behold, there come two woes more hereafter, World War II, which is past, and this upcoming third woe, the World War III, which will be nuclear, that battle of Armageddon, that battle in the valley of Jehoshaphat, and it's coming very quickly. So that's it with this video. And with this video, I hope you sincere Akim were edified. Just keep strong and keep pushing this word. We're almost out of this final wicked captivity of the heathen nations, chiefly of the Edomites. And as always, I'm going to say Abad Babal, Kwam Yasharala, and until next time, Shalom.